Okay, hey, we're going to do our little lecture here about the Byzantine Empire and Islam, and I'm not going to go through all of the notes. I'm just going to kind of hit some of the highlights, just to kind of give you guys a little bit of a break from this. And so when we talk about the Byzantine Empire, what we're really talking about is Constantinople and the areas that were controlled by that. And so when Rome split, um, between the Eastern Empire and the Western Empire, and they built this new Rome in Constantinople. Um, the power base of Rome moved to Constantinople to be with Constantine, and so Constantinople becomes the major city of the Western world at this point, right? But it's really kind of situated way far east. It's actually it's in between. It's on the edge of Europe and Asia. When you move that far away and you move closer to Greece, and you have this connection between the Roman Empire and the Greek Empire. Um, Greece really starts to influence uh, the Byzantines, and so Greek language takes over for Latin, and Greek becomes the language of the empire. And Christianity, because after all, Constantinople is founded by Constantine, who's the emperor that brings Christianity into vogue in the Roman Empire, and so you have this importance of religion and the blending of Greek and all of these things. And so although it's going to be different, like Constantinople's going to be different, there's everybody there is not going to call themselves a Byzantine. They're going to call themselves Roman, and they're going to see themselves as this extension of the Roman Empire, or even the Roman Empire itself. Constantinople was chosen because it was closer to the eastern frontier of the empire along the Danube River. What it ultimately does, I'm going to go ahead and just what Constantinople is right here between this. And so what it does is it takes all these Germanic tribes that were up in this area and that were causing Rome problems. And so instead of the Germanic tribes coming this way, because the power base of Rome had switched, they start to go westward and then down the Italian peninsula into Rome. And so we go there. Constantinople is famous for its thick walled cities, and this walled city is going to provide impenetrable and protection until 1453. Okay. Justinian is really the only I guess we're going to talk about two Byzantine emperors. But Justinian's important to us for a couple of reasons. Number one, he's the only Byzantine emperor that's going to try to re-establish one Roman rule, like trying to reconquer East and West, trying to conquer the Western Empire. He's going to come on the throne in 527, so after Rome has fallen. And he's going to have his emperor, or his generals invade northern Africa, and they're gonna win back territories that had been lost, and they're going to replace the Ostrogoths that had conquered Rome. And so by 1555 AD, according to this map, Justinian controls all the areas here in the purple, and so he's almost recircled the Mediterranean. Excuse me, almost recircled the Mediterranean Sea. And so Justinian's important for that. He has social uprisings called the Nika riots that you can read about if you want. And Justinian's also I guess also he's important because he's in his empire. He's gonna be the first person to deal with the bubonic plague, and so in 546 the plague hits Constantinople, and somewhere in the neighborhood of a third to half of the population dies within a year, and this just drastically reduces the power of Justinian's military presence, and the Ostrogoths are able to reclaim Italy, and North Africa falls out of control of the Byzantines, and so you see a weakening of the Byzantine Empire during this time frame, right? And so when the Byzantine Empire starts to take a step back because of the plague or because of internal trouble or whatever, it's going to create this weird power vacuum. And the Persian Empire, that had been in play for a long period of time, is at a weak period as well. And so, right around 600, right around the time that the Byzantines are dealing with the plague and the Persians are struggling, we're going to see a new religion come about that's going to take over large sections of the Middle East and North Africa. And of course, that religion is going to be Islam. And the Islamic faith is going to trace their heritage back to Abraham, which is interesting because Abraham is also the patron saint of Christianity and Judaism, in the fact that Abraham was made the first covenant with God, and then his son Isaac, and so forth and so on. So the Muslims trace their lineage back to Abraham, who had a child outside of marriage with his slave Hagar. And she gets cast off into the desert, and she cries out to God to save the boy because of the covenant that God was going to, make Abraham's descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky or whatever. And the angel comes, excuse me, and saves them. And so Muslims see a connection with Judaism and Christianity, and they'll refer to Jews and Christians as people of the book. There's this connection of monotheistic religions, right? And so in and of itself, Islam is a religion. However, as Islam starts to grow, it becomes much like in the Byzantine Empire, how you have Christianity as a religion and you have the Byzantine government. There's a mixing of those ideas. You're going to see a mixing of government and Islam as it starts to spread. And so Islam starts on the Arabian Peninsula, or modern day Saudi Arabia. The Haji is this area over here in the Eastern Arabian Peninsula, which was heavily traveled by trading caravans that would take stuff and put it on the backs of camels and go from spot to spot. And because the climate is desertous and it's so inhospitable, the tribal system there was really, really important. So like families within tribes would stay together for long periods of time, and they would support each other. And so like Marwan is kind of like this behavior or ideals or values that were shared by these tribal people, and they were brave and patient and persistent and revenge. And this idea of persistence and revenge is really important because if your caravan was raided and your stuff was stolen, well, your relatives would eventually avenge your loss from other people. Right. And these people are generous and hospitable, and they protect the poor and the weak. And these tribes, they offer the sense of security. So when Muhammad comes around, he's born in Mecca. He's a young man. He marries a very wealthy woman, and this kind of affords him a life of leisure. So he goes off into the desert and wonders about religion and life and all of that stuff, right? And so while he's off in a cave, he's visited by the angel Gabriel. God sends the angel Gabriel to him, and Muhammad basically talks to Gabriel, and he's like, "Hey, can you tell me the religion that's true?" And he's like, "Yes. The people, the book, the Jews and the Christians, they have some of it right, but like here's the thing." And so Muhammad reveals his revelation, gets written down, and it becomes the holy book of Islam, which is in the Quran. And then we have other books that make that up as well, right? So you have the other books there as well. And so to become the word Islam means to be submit, right? And so a Muslim is one who submits to God. And so the religion is Islam, and the people that practice that are Muslim. Islam is based on these 5 pillars of faith: just a confession of faith, prayer, almsgiving to the poor and the weak, fasting, and the Haji, which you go back to Mecca if you're able. And so really what this idea kind of is Muhammad trying to get these civilizations back to those core beliefs of our of Murawa, of our tribal people, right? Being brave and patient and protecting the weak. And so one of the differences between Muhammad and other prophets is the fact that Muhammad basically says that he's going to be the last prophet of God. He's the last prophet of God, and this is the last revelation that God is going to give to the people, right? And so Muhammad starts to preach in Mecca, and of course he's kind of preaching against greed and the establishment, and that doesn't go over well. And so he gets exiled, and he goes to the city in Medina, and he gets invited there, and he's kind of this prophet, judge, politician, military leader, right? And so he has to kind of he has to kind of start to figure out a way to support his own way there. And so he starts to raid caravans, which doesn't necessarily sound like the preaching that he was doing, but they start to raid caravans, they start to increase wealth. And then in 1630 they turn their forces on Mecca, and they go into Mecca, and they take control of Mecca, and they take over different ideas. And so, like, you have the kebab here, which was before Islam comes to the city was like a pagan temple, and it gets repurposed, and that's the destination of the Haji in Saudi Arabia. So Muhammad dies in 631 CE, and he doesn't have a successor named, and it's going to cause problems. There's going to be a number of successors that come along that are going to spread Islam out of the Arabian Peninsula into North Africa, all the way into Spain, through the Middle East, and it's going to rival the Byzantine Empire in power and influence, right? And there's a couple of reasons that it spreads the way that it does. One is the Byzantine Empire is dealing with the fallout of the plague, right? And so they have a huge event that's going to lose a lot of population. Secondly, this Persian Empire that was existing over here kind of is displaced, and it's not as powerful as it once was. And so it creates this weird vacuum where Islam starts to spread and spreads across North Africa, and fills that power vacuum all the way into Spain. And it's going to spread all the way into Spain, into France, in the 700s, when the Franks are going to fight in the Battle of Tours, and prevent the spread of Islam moving even further into Europe at that time. Okay, and so, like, I'm not necessarily going to talk about the expansion. I do probably want to talk a little bit about the split of Islam here. You can go back and read about the expansion, or I believe that the text covers it pretty well. But we're going to have a fight over the leadership of the religion in 644. And the caliphate is going to elect, or the leaders of the religion are going to elect Uthman as caliphate, or leader of the religion, over a guy by the name of Ali in 644. And this is the first time in Islam that the leader of the religion wasn't somehow related to Muhammad. And Ali was a blood relative of Muhammad. And so, like, the people, the supporters of Ali start to transform their Islamic beliefs into Shia Islam, which we'll see today. And basically the belief is this: that if the leader of the caliphate of Islam, for the Shias, has to be a blood relative of Muhammad, has to be able to trace their bloodline back to Muhammad, while the Sunni faith believes that the ruler of the religion can just be can just be anybody. Sunni is by far the more popular of the religions. This chart is saying 83% of Muslims today are Sunni. That's probably pretty true. You're probably looking somewhere between 80 to 90% are Sunni, somewhere between 10 to 15% are Shia. The Shia Muslims tend to be a little bit more radical and fundamentalist than the Sunnis. And so I'm not necessarily, I'm going to kind of skip over all of this. But ultimately what happens is that the caliphate moves its power base out of Mecca and out of the Arabian Peninsula to Baghdad in 754. And so 100 years Islam spreads all over, but Baghdad becomes the center of the Islamic world. And it becomes the head of learning, and so it starts to collect the works of the Persians and the Hindu and the Chinese and the Greeks and the Romans, and starts to hold on to all this. And so you're going to have this period that's going to be referred to as I'm going to scoot ahead here for a second, I'll come back, this golden age of Islam, in which you're going to have great advances in science and astrology and mathematics and all of this, and a huge library or cataloging of the world's importance. And eventually Baghdad in 1250 is going to be sacked by the Mongols, and they're going to take all this information and dump it into the Euphrates and the Tigris, and the rivers is said to run black with ink for months on end. And so all this knowledge it's kind of very similar to the burning of the Library of Alexandria, and the fact that all this ancient knowledge of the world is lost, and it's going to cause some problems. Now, when we talk about the Middle Ages, we'll come back and we'll talk about the Crusades. But it's kind of important to point out that Islam is going to spread and do all these things, but also it's going to be this kind of connection between Greece and between the ancient societies of Greece and Hellenistic societies that stretch into the Persian Empire and whatever. The Islamic world is going to have that knowledge sitting around, and when the Crusaders come in to free Jerusalem, they're going to run across that, and they're going to bring stuff back, and it's going to open up trade, and that's one of the things that's going to start to kickstart this the Renaissance that we'll talk about here in a couple weeks. So we'll kind of skip over that. Obviously, Byzantium and Islam are going to run into each other, and they're going to fight for control of different ideas and influence. And really the main conflict between Byzantium and the Arabic empires or the Islamic empires is not religion. It's going to be control of trade, and it's going to be economic in those types of things. And so you don't necessarily need to know all of that, but we have that in 867. Basil becomes emperor of the Byzantine Empire, and we'll go back to that. And he's a Macedonian, and so he's going to come from the Greek province, the same as Alexander the Great. And he's going to push for, I guess, this is called the Macedonian Renaissance that comes about this. He's going to push a lot of money into art and trying to bring back the cultural ways of the Greek influence and the Greek Empire. of that. And so there's going to be this cooperation and learning between Islam and Baghdad with all their books and knowledge and the Byzantines. And so the Byzantines are going to start to bring in this collection of Greek and Roman work and start to study it and bring it about. And so when the Crusades, again, when the Crusades come through and you start to see more collaboration between Europe, or let's say the West, which was the Western Roman Empire, and Constantinople and the Byzantines, which is the Eastern Roman Empire. Again, it's going to be one of those stepping stones for the for the Renaissance. Okay, and so that's really kind of our importance here. I need to touch base real quick about the Mongol Empire. The Mongol Empire is going to control basically basically the world's largest empire, right around 1300. And so I'm sure everybody in here has heard about the Silk Road, and the Silk Road that's going to connect Asian trade to the Middle East, and then therefore into Europe. And that's going to be maintained through Mongol control. Like the Mongols, Genghis Khan is going to come about and eventually conquer most of the Kublai Khan is going to take over great parts of China and dominate this area. And so, like, trade can go back and forth because there's such a strong Mongol oversight and taxation that allows that, and that's going to allow the movement of ideas and goods back and forth. And again, once the Crusaders start coming out of Europe down to the Middle East to liberate Jerusalem, these ideas from the East and from the Middle East, and then ideas that have been kind of laying dormant in Constantinople and in Greece, start to kick back up, and they start to flow back into Europe, and it's going to lead to that rebirth of the Renaissance that we'll talk about and end our class with. So anyways, I know I skipped over a bunch of stuff, but you guys have these notes available to you if you want to go through and read them. But most of what you need to get out of this unit was covered right there, and then what you need out of the textbook. So hopefully you're taking something out of that, and we will check in with you guys in a little bit. We'll talk about the Middle Ages later.